Meeting of the Transition Planning Commission to order. And let's begin, as always, with a moment of silent reflection on the extremely important task that we have before us. All right. You have the minutes before you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Jones, seconded by Mr. Holden. Are there any additions or questions or deletions from these minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Diane. The next item is the President's report. I'd like to, first of all, introduce, I think we have some new BCG team members here tonight that I'd like to introduce. Is Valerie Johnson here? All right, Valerie. This young lady looks like she was just born a few years ago. All these smart young people, I'm telling you. Valerie is going to be working with the Finance and HR Committee. Mark, is it Casale? Casale. Mark. Mark is going to be working with the Logistics and Communications Committee. And Sarah Dillard. Is Sarah here with us? She's not here tonight. We discussed Sarah at the last executive meeting. She's also going to be working with HR and education. I would like to... Dr. Samarelli and I are going after this meeting to do a listening tour at Holy Spirit. You got to remind me where that is afterward too. So we're going to stay on time. And also, Dr. Johnson and I will be doing filming a television show at the Germantown at the Germantown High School, which is a program that we are very proud of as Shelby County Schools, and we're filming that Friday, but we'll let you know when it shows. I think it only shows in Germantown, but we might download it to our website. Dr. Johnson does a really good job. We'll do that, and then there are other things that are going on constantly that have to do with activities. I want to remind you again that if you have a speaking engagement, it would be good to forward that date and time to the chairs of the Community Engagement Committee. Although we're not posting the individual speaking engagements, we do want to keep up with them. The other item that I would mention is that we, in looking at a number of, in looking at a recommendation from the Communications Committee that they will be making in a moment regarding whether or not we would have public speakers at this meeting. We also discussed the fact that sometimes those of us on this commission are not as aware of what's going on in the other committees as we might like to be, particularly since the work is beginning to really become more substantive. So what I would like to ask all the committee chairs is that if you have met during the week, that you do provide for us a report at this meeting. It may be, very brief, but at least it would allow us to know the steps that you are taking. We recognize that when we get to a point of any recommendations, that they, of course, would come to this body, but it's been noted that it would be helpful for other members to really know your progress and have some kind of report. So from this time on, if you would be sure that you have a committee ready. Ms. Brown may still email you because all of you are not having meetings every week, but we'd want to get those on there that we can. We also, this is not on our agenda, but we had an item that was brought forth in the Executive Committee that we would like to bring to this body at this time, and I believe, Mr. Jones, you were going to make that motion.
Yes, thank you. The Executive Committee met prior to this meeting, and a recommendation was brought forth and summarily agreed upon by the Executive Committee that the full TPC has an opportunity for the suburban mayors, well, for the municipal mayors, so that being the suburban mayors as well as as far as attending, Mayor A.C. Warden to attend, and this will be an opportunity for the suburban mayors to present the study that was provided to them by their consultant as it relates to municipal school districts. It will be the mayors presenting. It was agreed upon by the executive committee that that the consultants would be in attendance as well to answer any questions that they may have. But this is the recommendation from the executive committee that we hold one of our TCP meetings be dedicated to allowing particularly the suburban mayors an opportunity to present an overall view of the findings of their feasibility study for municipal school districts. And
thank you, Mr. Jones. And coming from the executive committee, that motion does not require a second, but I would like to I would like to call first upon Mayor Luttrell as the first person to discuss this, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the commission.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman, and I want to speak in support of the motion. Much of what I say I stated before the executive committee, so it's somewhat repetitious. Those of you that have heard it can grab a cup of coffee now and talk to the rest of the group, but I do think it's important to give a little bit of background of why I support this particular motion. My position on this panel is unique in the sense that I'm the only elected official that really represents, politically speaking, the entire county. Also, when we look at the composition of this board, the representatives on this board are people from various walks of life, some from education, business. Those of us that had appointing authority put a great deal of effort into trying to get the expertise at this table that was necessary to deliberate over this very critical issue. And I'm unique in that sense because I'm not a businessman, I'm not an education professional, I'm a politician. I'm on this board as a result of my position, my elected position. That said, I think that the interest that I must represent is, quite frankly, the political side of this question, as well as the operational side. And as I view the progress that we are making, I think we're making good progress as a committee as far as vetting the various proposals and the many ideas. But I'm concerned about the fact that we may be creating a wonderful product, but our inability to sell this product to the community is going to result in a flawed, failed product. I think it's important that we reach out to the community, to the suburban communities in particular, to hear their thoughts as it relates to municipal districts, and that seems to be the direction that most of the municipalities are considering, that we have an opportunity to question representatives from those municipalities as to what they're about, see if we can find common ground where we can work together as we move forward. That said, if we're successful in this gesture of reaching out and bringing the suburban communities to the table to discuss their priorities, and we're able to use that opportunity to gain public support for our work, then we have achieved what I think is the dual purpose, and that is to create a system that unifies our community. I look forward to the dialogue. I think it should be a healthy dialogue that's focused on the facts, is focused on the purposes of what the municipal districts are considering, and see if we can share with them some observations or gain from them some ideas that we could incorporate. At the end of the day, My concern is that we have a good education system that our community's behind. And the way that I see us going at this point, we're not moving in that direction. Hopefully this will be a catalyst for moving us in the direction of unifying our community. This is a volatile issue. It's a very emotionally charged issue, and we as a committee cannot afford to ignore that reality. So I look forward to having a healthy discussion, all of us having a healthy discussion, and hopefully seeing something progressive come from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there other comments? Mayor McDonald?
I would just speak as a municipal mayor. We look forward to the opportunity of sharing the reasons. Dr. Green specifically commented in the executive session a desire to understand why. I believe we can lay that out clearly. Whether there will be agreement on that or not is another matter. But I believe we have a clear understanding of the why, and we look forward to presenting that to this body as a whole and trying our best to answer any questions that you might have for us.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor McDonald. Are there other comments? Others that would like to speak? Seeing none, the motion is before us. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Now, we have discussed in the executive committee, and I'll refer you to the bottom of the page. We had planned on having an individual here from Nashville that would discuss the basic education program with us, the funding formula, on the 16th. We are still going to try to do that. We may dismiss the executive committee and have our meeting a little bit early. I will get those details. Ms. Brown will get those details to you. But the next possible, we want to do this as quickly as we can, and the next possible time that we could do it would be on the 16th, because our own Mayor McDonald is not here on the 10th. So we will let you know about the BEP presentation also, because that's a very important presentation. So we'll make adjustments on that. All right, the next item I'm very excited about. First of all, let me say hello and thank you to Commissioner George and Commissioner Malott back there, our two school board members. Are there any others? Did Mayor join or leave, or is he still back there? He left. I always like to recognize mayors. Okay. Thank you for being there. And I also want to say that I had the absolute privilege and joy today to visit Lewis Padgett's school. And, you know, I've been wondering kind of about Lewis Padgett. Sometimes he's, you know, you just don't know about him, but he has a wonderful, wonderful school where teachers are happy, and you ask them why they're there, and they say because we love the children, and they are empowered. It was just really a delightful experience to be at North Haven, so I really enjoyed that. You know, I'm not saying they aren't. Sometimes I want to get over there and tell him to hush and stuff, but he was. It was delightful.
Ms. Prescott.
Yes.
If I may, I'd like to also recognize, you know, he switched hats a couple of times, so I don't know, I may be mistaken here, but I'd also like to recognize we have
Patrick
a
Smith.
state official, yes,
Patrick
state
Smith,
official here, and
yeah.
Mr. Drew Kim here.
Patrick, would you raise your hand?
So Mr. Smith is the, no, okay, gotcha. I told you you keep switching hats on me, but Mr.
He
Smith
has switched hats a lot.
He used to be the assistant commissioner for education for the state of Tennessee, but he keeps switching hats on me, so I wasn't quite sure, but I wanted to recognize him.
I knew him first through the Tennessee School Board Association too. So, all right, at this point we've got a presentation from the assessment committee. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Green. I think it's going to be an outstanding presentation, very informative. Dr. Green. I'm going to scoot out of the way, and you can use this.
Thank you, Chairman Prescott, and good evening to the Transition Planning Commission and to people who are in the audience. The rationale behind the work of the Assessment Committee is the belief that in order to have meaningful, sustained change, the change agent must have a vision of the outcome of the desired change. In essence, the change agent must understand current conditions and be able to develop the capacity to move any discrepancies that exist between current conditions and the vision. During the existence of the Transition Planning Commission, we have often heard the phrase, a world-class school system. If that is a part of our vision, and I trust that it is, in order to get to that vision, we must first understand where we are currently. We must understand our current conditions. Tonight, the initial report of the Assessment Committee, a core set of data, if you please, will go a long ways in identifying the current conditions of the combined school district. No longer are we speaking of Memphis City schools and Shelby County schools. Rather, we began a data presentation of a combined school district. The committee, with the able assistance of members from both school systems, has worked diligently to answer some very important questions. The questions are, who are the students that we are planning to serve? Where do they live? Where do they currently attend school? In which areas do they excel academically? What is the academic standing of the schools in which they attend? What are their academic needs? How many of the students are economically disadvantaged? How many have special needs? How many are leaving high school ready to enter college? How do they score on the ACT? What is the mobility rate? In which areas do disparities exist? What is the graduation rate? What is the attendance rate? How many preschool-age students have the experience of a preschool education, and how many do not? Having answers to these questions is not a solution within itself. However, it does position the other established committees a starting point to make data-driven decisions, as they now will have information to use as they draft plans to remove any discrepancies that currently exist between current conditions and the vision. We now invite your attention to the data that paints a picture of the current condition of the combined school system as it exists tonight. The presentation will be made by our consultants.
Thank you, Dr. Green.
No. I want you to stay in the front. Yes, thank you, Dr. Green. Jamie is going to join me for the presentation. As Dr. Green said, this is an initial report. It is the first step of what I anticipate will be many to get you data that is going to help with the committee level decision-making process, and then come back and roll up to a broader report. That said, the preliminary questions, as Dr. Green articulated them were very important for us to get this base foundational knowledge, and we appreciate the direction that was provided by the leadership of this committee to be able to present this preliminary report. What I would like to do tonight, this is relatively high-level summaries of some detailed analyses that was provided to the TPC as pre-read, but I anticipate that everyone hasn't yet had a chance to go through it. I'm going to highlight certain things in the presentation, but I anticipate questions both tonight and after tonight. Anticipate and invite, welcome in fact, questions that would lead us to further analyses that your individual committees might have, so that we can make sure to give you the information and the analysis that is going to enable the best decision making possible. That said, there is some context in terms of definitions. Most of the analysis that's in here is, as Dr. Green stated, the merged district. That is intentional. It is about all of the students that we are anticipating having to serve. And if there are questions about things that need to be pulled out, we could do that in addition to what is here, but we felt very strongly that we needed to get to treat all of the students in schools within Memphis City Schools and Shelby County Schools as they exist now as one. This reflects the 2011-2012, the students that are enrolled in the 2011-2012, but the test scores in particular reflect the 2010-2011 school year. It's the most recent school year that we could get. And there are some specifics on the definitions that are used in this material. Based on time, I'm going to go relatively quickly. Please let me know if you'd like me to stop. At the end, I would like to open it to questions about any of the material that is in here. The sections that we have start with the geographic distribution of schools. The first point that I just make is that the school locations currently map closely to student density. There are some exceptions, but in general, this map was relatively close. This is a map, obviously, of the merged geography, where there are students and where there are schools. Across Memphis City Schools currently, and the 4 geographies that exist, and the individual Shelby County School municipalities, the student demographics vary, but we thought it was important to just lay out where the schools are by the different levels, what the total enrollment is, and then some of the specifics about where the students are, what percentage are economically disadvantaged, what percentage have disabilities, and this is an estimate based on the information that we have, what percentage were English language learners. And you'll see that there are quite wide ranges on most of these lines. In terms of the student demographics and needs, looking at the district as a whole, you'll note that the district enrollment has been declining on average of about 1% a year for the past 5 years, but it's been a relatively steady decline. But that the percentage of students that are economically disadvantaged has remained stable over this time. And that is actually mostly seen on the right side, where we have the 2008-2009 all the way through the 2010-2011 school year.
You didn't mean percentage. You meant
the total number of students. That's correct. Sorry. The total number of students that are economically disadvantaged has remained stable. This is the percentage, though. And as you can see, there's been a slight decline, or actually this is at the particular grade levels. You'll see that the non-economically disadvantaged goes up as you get more senior in the school. Now, there could be lots of reasons for that. We haven't gone to the level to who is not included in this, but it is important to see where there are students with particular needs in different school levels and different grade levels. In terms of the students with a need for additional services, 14% of the of all students have special needs. 7% of them, well, 12% have special needs. 7% of all students are English language learners, and those are things that we need to consider as we're putting together the overall plan. We are weighting data in certain spots, but there is an outstanding question. One of those is homelessness. One of those that you'll see later is we have mobility data for Memphis City schools currently in this report, but not Shelby County schools. We are awaiting that, and we'll do that analysis when we have that data. This is based on this year's enrollment numbers again. Mm-hmm.
Under your slide, your number for the gifted students, is that including just all optional students aren't considered gifted?
That's right.
So is there a piece where you're looking at students who are enrolled in optional programs, or?
In optional programs total, we have those numbers, but they're not on this. We have the numbers both in optional schools and in optional programs that will be considered, and we can provide that. It's not in the materials to date.
Could we go back a slide?
Yeah.
Thanks. Would it be fair to consider that the reason for the decline in the decline in economically disadvantaged children as the grade levels progress is the dropout of those students along the way?
I want to correct. So we had that discussion in the assessment committee meeting. It actually may be a blend of that and a reporting issue. As free and reduced is the indicator for economic disadvantage, there's a sense that older students are less likely to request that service.
That's correct.
Thanks.
They're embarrassed.
And then mobility, as I was stating, we have good information on Memphis City Schools mobility, and both in terms of transfers within the school year and mobility rate by school. So we'll talk about those separately. The mobility and graduation rates, as you can see on this slide, actually varies quite substantially throughout the district. But at a whole, at an average level for the district, if we look at all of the students that change schools once during the school year or enroll after the cutoff day that we're talking about, you'll see that it is relatively the same percentage, but different numbers of students. Again, this goes back to number of students that are enrolled. So you'll see 10%, 12%, and 11% of students in general. Any questions or comments on that? And attendance rate also varies quite widely between schools, from everything from with each of these lines representing a single school. You'll have everything from 100% attendance rate down to, I think that the lowest was 87% or so attendance rate. And we have, in certain instances, given you the state average line so that you can see how many schools are above or below that.
Nikki, can you go back one slide, please?
Yes.
So I've added, one more slide. I added those numbers there, and just looking at the mobile number, and actually I did not add, I did add total. Looking at this mobility rate, that's close to 11,300, which is greater than 10% of our total student population. Do you have any idea of where MCS or Shelby, with this being just MCS, where we would compare to some of our peer districts? Is it higher, lower?
Peer districts in terms of or other
Size.
large urban
Yes.
school districts?
Yes.
My experience is that that's actually a bit lower, but my experience is primarily Prince George's County, Chicago, and Reggie Cleveland.
Cleveland, it would be lower than Cleveland as well.
Okay, thank you.
And just so you know, there's an important piece of this that we haven't added that are going to add, that the cutoff here is the first 20 days. It's also challenging if a student enrolls at day 19. And so there's
Gotcha.
we're going to bring data to show that as well.
Okay.
Because it presents challenges for the district.
Thanks.
And for the students. Yes, Mr. Hart.
How did you get the percentage? 5,209 is less than 10% of the enrolled student body.
Sorry, so
This is Memphis only.
But now,
This is Memphis only, not the total.
I thought Memphis student body was like 110,000.
Right, so this is
just
elementary
elementary.
students in Memphis, and middle school students in Memphis, and high school students in Memphis.
Does MCS have data on the reason for the transfer? I mean, do they know how many of the mobile is because families dissatisfied with the school versus just family economics make them move around? I mean, is there any kind of exit info?
So that we capture that? I don't believe so. I'm sorry, Dr. Green, what were you saying?
But there is a high correlation between economically disadvantaged and mobility.
There absolutely.
If I may, I want to remind the committee that we are filtering these 3 slides, the one previous to this one, and the other. That mobility slides will need to be filtered for noise a bit more carefully, because beginning with the one at the 30%, the one that represents the schools, those slides are going to be filtered and refined a bit. Am I not correct, Dr. Green? We're going to need to work on those some more, because you see the volume of questions coming out here. And it's because the mobility index, as recorded by both districts, even though this is just MCS, we're doing what Ms. Stanton said earlier. We were not comparing apples to apples, because I took a look back today at my own situation. And my mobility index will be 49, you see, and the highest I see there is 32. So I would say we're going to have to filter those 3 slides in our assessment committee and really have that discussion to come up with a clear indicator of what a mobile student is, a highly mobile student, because I went back into our statistics for the Shelby County School District, and we work our mobility index a bit differently. So we're going to have to filter those slides.
To Mr. Paget's point, there was considerable discussion in the last assessment committee meeting around these slides, and we are aware that they need to be tweaked some.
I think Mr. Pageant brings up a larger issue around how pieces are being calculated, because under my understanding, there is a requirement under state law on how you present this information. So is he saying that they're calculating them differently, or?
I mean, Bill White from Memphis is shaking his head back there, and he helped provide some of this data.
It's how the data is captured. If you'll notice, mobile student says enroll in a school after the first 20-day period. So perhaps the first 20 days, what happened during the first 20 days may not be captured in the data. You see, it may not be captured there. So it's not captured, and as she said, day 19, and then those students that transfer or move about to another district, because we're one state within a 3-state region. Those students that cross the river west or head south to Mississippi, we're not exactly filtered out all of the noise that we can make that capture so that it's truly representative of what it is the students are doing as we move about. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Good evening, commissioners, commission members, whatever you call yourselves, TPC members. There is no state definition of mobility. There's no federal definition, no state definition. For some of these things there are, like attendance rate, graduation rate, those things are well defined. We just happen to have in Memphis City Schools some mobility data that we have used, and so this is all going to depend on how you define mobility. We have taken a very conservative approach by looking beyond the first 20 days. If you look within the first 20 days in Memphis City Schools, you may see a lot of movement. In fact, you often read in the paper about the late enrollees that we have. So this is just one definition that we've been using for a couple of years. Our plan is to talk with the staff in Shelby County Schools, try to come up with a common definition that we all think makes sense. And I think that's what Mr. Paget was referring to, where we will try to get back with the consultants about how we might look at mobility for both districts, and then certainly for the combined district.
It may help to understand why we requested that information, and I think that was one of the things that I asked that we look at. And the idea was to look at curriculum to see how we need to standardize that. So the point was, if we have students that are moving, whether they are transferring or whether they are actually moving in terms of the location of their home, we need to look at that for that reason.
Yes,
So-
ma'am. And we agree. We think it's a very important statistic to review, particularly from our experience in Memphis City schools. It's just that it's, for one, we don't have a common definition. And then secondly, it's actually a fairly complex analysis to do when you start looking at the movement of kids in and out of the system and from school to school. So it just takes some time to be able to do this. Thank you.
Follow up because I want to follow up on
And that's what we're getting to, so
Mark's
okay.
question here relative to percentages. I mean, even if you add up, I'm looking at 11,000 out of 100,000. I mean, that's not 33%.
No, one way to look at it too is that,
Doesn't add?
right, here's how you should look at it. We have, if you look at that 5209, we have 52,000 elementary students. We have 36,000 middle school students, and we have 24,000. Well, okay, I'm a little off, but if you just look at the elementary number 5209, that's saying 10% of our elementary population. So extrapolating that, we have 52,090 students in all of our elementary schools. Okay. And so we would just, well, no, middle school. So we would take whatever, we would take the other 88%.
So this represents
and that
about
would be the
the about 100,000 students in Memphis City schools, separated into the grade levels.
On those slides that one and the one you just passed,
This one?
where
The
can we
attendance rate?
find the information to drill down? Those are representing schools. Is there someplace we can go to look specifically at what schools those are?
For the individual schools,
Yeah.
we've got the report. I think that there's a question about the data, and so Mayor McDonald,
But all of this is publicly available on the Tennessee State Report Card. You could search up for any school in the district and pull it.
so if that's accurate, Jamie, I think that what he's asking is, can we make available just the Excel spreadsheet of what each individual school is, and we can make that available. This is obviously a PowerPoint representation of the analysis that's being done in Excel, and we can make that available to the commission
Well,
members.
Would you make, are you asking that they do make that available to you? Would you make that available to us and we can get
We
that?
just clarify, so we've agreed, I think, that school level data, you can publish student
Right.
level data.
That's correct.
We would only present
But
in the
he's asking for just the name of the school,
Right.
is he not? Yeah.
Especially in regards to the next slide, graduation rate.
And the next slide is graduation rate. I'm sorry, Ms. Stanton.
There are 5 schools that have 100% attendance rate.
That is correct. I thought it was 3, or maybe
Three.
it is 5. No, it's
If
5
there's
on here.
one school with 100% attendance rate, that doesn't seem reasonable
And-
to me. I'll be honest. I'd like to know how they accomplished that.
This is the attendance data that is
I'm
provided.
afraid I know how they accomplished it.
There are also 2 schools with 100% graduation rate.
That I could understand.
Okay.
That makes more sense.
So looking at the high schools in both districts again, you will see that there is a range in graduation rates, and we specifically tried to highlight the schools that have the higher percentage of economically disadvantaged students, as that is a different representation, and made a cutoff of 75% for these for the purposes of this slide. Again, the school level data is all data that is available, publicly available, so we can make that available. Mr. Keel.
Does this slide include charter schools?
It includes all of the high schools in the combined Shelby County schools. So yes.
Can you tell us who those 2 schools are on the far left?
Jamie.
Can we?
One of them.
Bill, can we? We're getting a nod from the back that we can.
One of them, I think, is going to be the middle college.
They're both middle college.
Middle
schools.
college
One
at-
is
at
the middle
right.
is middle college, and the other is a middle college of a different name.
Right.
They have.
It's public information,
That's right.
Tennessee State Report Card, and it is our 2
They have
middle
more than 30
colleges.
students.
It's Hollis Price Middle College and the middle college that works in conjunction with Christian Grace University that's
Dr. White, could you tell us what the student population is in those schools? I know there's relatively small.
I don't remember the numbers. I think they typically have a senior class of about 30 students, something like that. And it is a small population that they work with very closely and very carefully. These students are also taking college-level courses at either CBU or Lemoyne Online.
Thanks.
So we'll have to tell Chris Farmer things.
So school readiness. Here we wanted to look at the pre-K participation in particular amongst. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Hart.
I'd like to go back one.
This slide. This slide.
No, you're too far.
Okay. What's the subject matter or the topic, and I'll find it. The summary slide.
Summary.
Okay.
When did the pre-K and kindergarten get included in enrollment numbers? Does anybody know the year?
Oh, that's a good question.
Anybody back there know that year?
Years ago.
I didn't hear the question.
When did pre-K and kindergarten become a part of the enrollment figures? Kindergarten's been there a long time,
For
hasn't it?
reporting purposes, I've been in the district 24 years and it's been there. Kindergarten. It's always reported.
We've had kindergarten.
The question is, are we apples to apples, and is this more pronounced than it looks because pre-K was added as well? Your question is, do we have apples to apples as the base in terms of the same grade levels pre-K through 12 or K through 12? And that's something that we can go back and check.
Thank you.
Absolutely. But going on to the pre-K question, there are likely on the order of 2,000 pre-K students that are not getting, or the students that are pre-K age that are not getting pre-K services right now. So just something to think about in terms of where we want to put our attention. Finally, and importantly, the student academic performance. And for this, we use primarily TCAP and the TVAAS scores. You'll see on these, we try to give a relatively complex slide, but it's giving quite a bit of information, which is subject matter information on percent of students proficient or advanced at every grade level that we have from 3 through 8, both in terms of the total for all of the students in the district and compared to what the state average is. I won't go through the details of what every line is. You'll see that there's a range in every subject matter depending on whether you're talking about 3rd grade through 8th grade, but there's also overall a gap to the state average.
Those of us that are colorblind challenged
It's going from 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, so it's escalating in grade level, yes. We also took this and looked at the gap between higher income and low income students, and what this represents in any particular bar. Just to go through one bar, the 3rd grade bar for reading, which is the one that's called out on the slide. 66% of the higher income students were advanced or proficient, while 22% of the lower income. So that represents a gap of 44% between higher and lower income. We did that same calculation for every subject matter in every grade, and again compared it for the merged for all of the students in the county versus the state average. Yes, Mr. Boyd.
Is the higher income, is that simply all those students who are...
All that are not low income.
Not receiving free
Yes.
and reduced lunch?
That is correct.
That's a huge...
Mayor McDonald.
The students who are not receiving pre-K.
Yes.
Is there, am I correct in understanding, is there agreement that the empirical evidence so far only exists for some improvement up to the third grade, and after that, we can't tell.
No, that's not the case. Vanderbilt just recently released a study that refuted that assertion. That the report that you're referring to is probably 25 to 30 years old, but Vanderbilt released a study probably in 2009, 8 or 9 that refuted that.
Well, my understanding of that study is that it is still a study in process. I didn't know that it was a completed study. But anyway, that's as far back as Mayor Luttrell's transition team, when we had a group around education and we talked about the need for pre-K there and the need to promote that, one of the things we found as a stumbling block in that committee was lack of that evidence, which we believe should exist. When you look at girls' clubs, boys' clubs, they can show you their graduation rate. They've been keeping data long enough to say that they make a difference. The Head Start program did not have such data at the time. So you're saying the Head Start data is now available in the Vanderbilt?
No, what I'm saying is that this was the study that you were referring to was a national study.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just looking at Memphis City Schools, it wasn't looking at the county of Shelby.
Right.
It was just saying the overall efficacy of those type of efforts.
Yeah.
We're going to recognize Ms. Bradshaw.
Okay, but the report that you're referring to that said that there's not much carryover beyond third grade, that's a study that has since been updated, and the findings are different than the conclusion of that original study that you're referring to.
Can we get a copy of that study?
Sure. Could y'all pull that for us? Vanderbilt study?
And I just wanted to say one of the longest standing studies, if you look at the Abecedarian studies or even some of the Perry preschool studies, just you would find that there is that you don't have that loss after third grade, and then also greater is there is a significant return on investment for the community. For every $1 that you invest in early childhood, there is a minimum of $17 return for the community. So just want to make sure that we understand that.
Yeah, I'm for it. We just needed some evidence.
Well, we know that what this data revealed to us is that we have a large number of students coming to us without pre-K services, and they do not do as well in first grade as those students who have had pre-K service. Even more revealing is the fact as we progress through the grades from kindergarten to first grade, from first grade to second grade, there's an escalation in the number of students who are not successful in those grades, even with those that have had pre-K services. So actually the numbers.
Related to that, I just want to make a point, is you see the gap decreases slightly, right, over time. So the younger grade students have, higher income students have a larger gap. And over time it's slightly narrowed. We hope it would be more narrowed, but I think it's important to realize.
Again, tried to look at all of the schools, and you'll see that in third grade reading proficiency across all of the schools, you just see a quite pronounced differential between the schools that are have the highest levels of proficiency to the schools that have the lowest level of proficiencies, and the similar finding in third and fourth grade math. We could do this for any of the subjects at any of the individual grade levels, and it is pretty representative. We did want to provide some information on the value-added growth measure, as it is something that is helpful in the discussion. There's the overview of what it is, what the Tennessee Value-Added Assessment System is measuring in terms of growth in a subject matter, but more, and this is important to know. I would say that even more important is to think about some of the benefits of the TVAAS in terms of the fact that, quite honestly, Tennessee has one of the best longitudinal data systems that I have seen, and that is fantastic. And what information is that it's providing you to be able to get data and have a much more informed decision-making process. And the way that the algorithm and the way that you think about it has made every attempt to eliminate a lot of the confounding elements of demography that are important to be able to remove as much as possible. So kudos overall. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
I'd just like to know, and maybe some staff can tell me, the last time that TCAP was on, I know the test change was
Do you know?
Last time
The last time it was normed. The TCAP was normed. 9. I'm getting a 2009 from the back. Thank you, Mr. Parker. Go ahead. Yes, Mrs. Stanton.
Can someone explain what the formula for TVAS is and how it works?
I'm going to oversimplify. The basic idea of growth is in percentiles. So the standard you'd expect is that a student who performs at the 50th percentile one year in their peer group would continue to perform at the 50th percentile. What TVAS measures is deviations from that expectation. So if a 50th percentile student performs at the 60th, you would get an NCE, normal curve equivalent gain of 10 points. Normal curve equivalent is not exactly the same as percentile, but for purposes of understanding, it's quite similar. So it's deviation from expected performance, and they measure students' performance over a number of years, so that you say if you see a student who's consistently performing, again, at the 30th percentile for 3 years, it's fair to assume that a standard classroom experience would lead that student to perform again at the 30th percentile. So if they overperform, something going on in the school or classroom has helped them, and if they've underperformed, the inverse.
Mr. Chairman, perhaps if you put on our website a link to the school, what do you call it? The
TVAS?
No, the what?
State report?
Yeah, the report card. Then that would help us too.
Put it on our website?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a link to it. The one thing I wanted to highlight here is that while the gains have fluctuate, overall you'll see relatively high gains in math as a subject, which is something to take note of and to think about in the way that we think about educational service provision, for example. And this is just an example of a comparison of the two methods that we're using. You'll see that the TCAP is relatively highly correlated. It was very highly correlated to economic disadvantage. So this is an absolute score. However, the growth score is not. And so it's just... For purposes of this conversation, we wanted to make sure that everybody understood that this was happening, and so it's important to take into consideration both the absolute and the growth in the way that we think about the providing educational services and the strategies that we put together there. And again, just a sample of one subject matter and one grade level.
So, Nika, can I ask that you elaborate a little bit on that? So, on the last slide,
Mm-hmm.
so is that saying that we have some higher economic students who aren't experiencing?
Use the mic.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to ask if she would elaborate on this slide. So are we saying that, or is the data showing that we have some students who are higher economic students who are not experiencing growth in the schools that they're currently housed in?
So again, because growth is an expectation to a norm, if you started at the 80th percentile and stayed at the 80th percentile, it would be recognized as zero growth because it's expected that that's what you're doing. And so I wouldn't expect to have people, the far, your left side, economic disadvantage to be very high growth. You want to make sure that they're not very low growth and they're not declining, but you wouldn't expect them to be high. The bigger point is that there are definitely gains to be made for students that are economically disadvantaged, and although the overall correlation on the TCAP absolute measure is highly correlated, there's a large spread at the other end in terms of not providing growth, actually declining growth, and high end of growth. And that's something that we should think about. What are the things that are driving not the outlier, but some of the higher end growth in the more economically disadvantaged students, and are there learnings there that we can integrate into our educational services plan?
I think it's important to note that there is a disparity. I think there is I think it is important to note that there is a disparity between students who are not economically disadvantaged. There is a disparity.
Okay. Thank you.
And then career and college readiness, we also wanted to highlight the number of students that are doing more advanced coursework. In particular, that you have a very large number of students that participate in career and technical education, which is actually not on this particular page, and a high number that are participating in honors courses in the 45% level. To the question that was asked before, I think about some of the special programs, IB and the like, those are also captured here. If we look at ACT scores, however, 24%, if I look at, in particular, the distribution of ACT scores, this is just the straight reading of all of the scores, composite and overall by subject matter. If you look at all students, you'll see that 24% are scoring an ACT score of 21 or above, which is the benchmark for college readiness, with the other students scoring in some way less than that.
I just had one clarification. So the ACT defines college ready for each subtest, so math, verbal, reading, science. And so we've used a simplified definition here just to look at the number of schools scoring on average at college ready, which would be 21 or above. There's frequently also you calculate those who score at a 22, an 18, a 21, a 24 or above in each of the components. And across the district, that average is 9%. So it's a different definition, but I think it's been shared and talked about, just so you know.
It's what percent?
9%. So there's a conservative way to look at a composite score, and then there is a more, a less conservative way that actually requires you to make a certain level on all of the different subject matter scores. And when we look at that across all of the subject matter scores, you get the 9% that Jamie was just describing.
Excuse me. Do we have these data for the SAT also? There's a small number, I know, but do we have that data too?
We could ask for that. Currently, we just have the ACT since it's mandated. People know, so all students take the ACT. We could ask for that.
We did also, for this particular cut, segment them into, again, the economically disadvantaged students and all students other than those that are receiving free and reduced lunch. I think it's important to note that at that college ready, at the more liberal college ready level, we're at 43% that are scoring 21 or above. And that's the extent of the analysis that's been done to date. Again, I'm sure that there are several questions that brings up, and we are open to additional analyses as necessary for input into individual committee levels, but hopefully this gives you some foundational information.
We should have done this at the beginning. I'm going to ask all members of the assessment committee to stand. All members of the assessment committee, would you just stand a minute? Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Then I would like to, ask Mr. Stevens and Mr. White to introduce any members in the audience that have participated in collecting this data.
From Shelby County, we have Dr. Tim Satterlin and Herschel Burton. I'm not sure are there any others.
A large number of people from Shelby County participated in collecting this data, and we want to recognize them. Mr. White, anyone here?
I had some key staff members involved. I'm very appreciative of their work. However, they are not with me tonight.
Okay. The Transition Planning Commission, we'd like to ask, I know this was kind of rushed, but we'd like to ask if you would review this document, and if you have questions, to jot those questions down and send those questions, who should they send them to? You. Well, yes, Jamie did a yeoman's job about this, and we need to give her a round of applause. She's just, yeah. Okay, thank you. Well, send let's do this within, say, by Monday of next week. If you would send any questions or concerns about this report that you have to Jamie. Just a few closing comments, and I know we're running short. The report that you have with us tonight is a critical first start, but some additional data is needed if we are to effectively address the needs of all students. So there will be a second committee report, and in addition to the data that you've seen tonight, we are going to look at some teacher effectiveness data and some leadership effectiveness data, coupled with some of the other points that would enhance the work of the transition team moving forward. Again, thank you for allowing us to make the presentation.
And thank you, Dr. Green. I think that is really an outstanding first step, and because it really is the first time that we've looked at the district as it would look if it were merged. And just as in either one of the districts, you've got high scores and you've got low scores, but you deal with all of them. So this gives us a chance to look at the whole district and really will inform tremendously our establishment of educational priorities and so forth. And Dr. Green, I just appreciate your leadership, appreciate the work of Boston Consulting, and as always, appreciate the work of both districts, because the individuals in the districts are heavy at all that they do every day, getting ready for TCAPs, getting ready, supporting their teachers, and this is extra work for them. But as I always tell them, would you rather us do it without you or with you? We want to have your input. We want to know that you're that we are relying on many of you and the resident expertise to help us. So very much appreciated. And again, if you have questions, get them to Jamie. Now, the next presentation comes from the Community Engagement Committee. And Kenya, are you doing that?
Thank you. As you all know from the Community Engagement Committee, we've been conducting listening sessions since January. We've had over 1,200 people attending our January listening sessions, and that's not encompassing the ones that we've had in the last few weeks. What we provided to you all tonight was a summary document with some key themes that we were picking up across the varying community listening sessions. Well, we want to highlight that there were several differing opinions, but there were also some shared expectations, and we captured the key themes. Each of you has also been provided separately detailed notes from each session, so if you're interested in what was specifically stated at the Collierville session, you have a fully detailed document with all of the notes. We've also highlighted specific actions that we believe that should be taken as next steps based on this feedback. There is a document we're going to come overview around myth and rumors, and then some suggested additions that we have to our current set of frequently asked questions. If you and as you know, we have 9 additional listening sessions in February. I would ask of TPC members, if you have not attended a listening session, even if you do not facilitate, we had charged each commissioner to attend 2 sessions. We would like to ask that you fulfill that obligation that each of us committed to within these next 9 sessions and attend. We believe that it helps to broaden our perspective of why we're doing this work by attending those meetings. We on page 2. This is the process that we're going through. We currently are in our primarily inbound session where we're doing the community-wide listening sessions, and then also have had specific speaking engagement and setting our FAQs. In March, we will be moving into the process that as you give us information from each of your committees where we want to have discussion and feedback from the community, where we'll be going out and present that information. And then also as we go into May and June and when we have actual recommendations from the committee, we'll go back out into the community. So we want to let you all know that as you charged us, we believe community engagement is an integral part throughout this process, and so we're taking the steps to be able to ensure that we do that. On page 3, you will begin to see what we pulled out as some of the key themes around different pieces around educational services. I won't go through and read these pieces to you because you were provided this. What I would ask is that each of you take a look at these and then read what are some of the quotes and comments that were made by parents and community members concerning that piece. If you would go to page 7. So all of the page 3 through 6 are just key themes and supporting quotes, so we'd ask that you take a look at that. On this page, these are some of the key myths and rumors that we have been hearing. We wanted to provide these to you so as you move forward, you can be able to address these. Our FAQs actually addresses the first 3, and these are actually taken verbatim from what the community stated. One of the pieces on item 4 where it says research does not condone huge urban districts, we wanted to clarify this was not the opinion of the Community Engagement Committee on any of these. These are items that we're hearing. We're going to provide you additional information on how you all should respond to those. On the first 3, we've already provided those in the FAQs. But we're asking all TPC members to actively engage in helping to dispel these myths. On page 8, we are presenting to you an additional frequently asked question that we've heard in many of the community listening sessions. What is our proposal for increasing parental involvement, especially at schools with low involvement? We wanted to go back to what we felt like we had discussed in our core values, that the TPC believes that parent engagement is essential and the plan will emphasize the importance. I'm happy to say that in the admin discussion earlier today, I got to listen, and they really brought this up as one of their key themes that they wanted to address. So I can say that it is being discussed in multiple committees. We do want to pose 2 specific questions that we have been hearing that we do not have, that we don't feel like is in our purview to address. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. So BCG is so competent that they had already done what we had asked them to do earlier today. So my notes don't reflect what you're seeing on the screen, so I'd ask everyone to turn to the screen. The second question is one of the pieces that we talked about earlier on the myths. Does research condone huge urban districts? Academic research is mixed on the impact that school district size has on student achievement. And so we'll provide this to each of the members so that you can have information on that. The 2 questions at the bottom are questions that we're asking to Shelby County School Board. So what I'd like to ask is our members who are also members on the Shelby County School Board send this information back to the school board, and you have both of those in front of you. And these were questions that we have been repeatedly hearing throughout the listening sessions. On page 9, we felt like there were some key considerations that committees need to take a look at as we've been getting key stakeholder feedback. So we've segmented them into different committees where we thought that they had the best fit. But I would urge each of you to take a look at this because there may be some overlap in your committee, and so making sure you're thinking about this as you move forward. On page 10. These are some key questions that we want to make sure that we're using as we're going into phase 2. I am excited about our contract with Red Deluxe. They were at our meeting today, and really I believe that they have the capability to help us codify clear messages on this. And that's the presentation from the Communications Committee. Are there any questions from the group?
Ms. Richards?
I just want to take a minute and thank the Communications Committee and the efforts that they have made. I had the pleasure of being the facilitator at the Arlington High School, which was the largest session of this week. So far, it was the largest to date. I appreciate the members who came with me. We had a small but very dedicated group who stayed at the end, to the end with me. I just want everybody to know I learned more from that session about what was going on than I told them about what we were doing for them. So if you get a chance, even if you don't feel comfortable up on stage doing a piece of this, but if nothing else, be sure you attend a couple of these. It's really important.
Ms. Richards did an outstanding job, and I'm just noticing that Mr. Spiller's not here, and this may be the first meeting he's missed, so I hope it's not as a result of the Arlington meeting. If we see him, we need to tell him we missed him
Madam
tonight.
Chairman,
Mr.
make
Padgett.
sure you remember the words visible pinata. She said she was the visible pinata. We did enjoy
She did a great job. And I, too, want to thank the Communications Committee. I think the slides, particularly on the implications for the specific committees, is very, very important, and the categorizing the areas, and also looking ahead to the messages. When we have been listening, but there are messages that we have to put forth, and so I think that's a very good job. I know when I look at that timeline, I mean, we're being squashed a little bit with things that are going on, but that's a very aggressive timeline, and it would, when we look at what is happening in May, that would be plenty of time to get our report done and to the deadline that we originally set. But doing a great job. Mr. Boyd.
Madam Chairman, I really appreciate the supportive comments from the Commission with regard to the work of the committee, but I want to say that we wouldn't be half as good as we are if it wasn't for BCG.
Absolutely.
And I just want to say how supportive they have been, and we are losing one of their team members, Delano Brissett, and he's the guy who's been developing a lot of this data and information from the Community Engagement Committee, and we're going to miss him. We wish him well. Wish he were here, but anyway, good work on their part. So
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for mentioning that, Delano. Because as I was introducing new folks, I'm realizing that in consulting teams, sometimes you have people come in, and sometimes they go on to other things. But we appreciate all that you've done while you have been here. One of the things I can say about BCG and Diane Brown is that when I email them at 11:30 or 12 at night, or sometimes it's later than that, they always email me back. I'm thinking, surely I thought I would email them and they wouldn't be there. But we appreciate the work that you're doing. The next item on the agenda is really an item for information, but I think it was an important item, and this is that there was a resolution that was passed by the Shelby County School Board that affirms our core values. And when Ms. Richards said you learned things at the community meetings, we learned that it was dangerous to number our core values because no matter how you numbered them, even though we know that they are all equally core, then that's not always the case. And I see another school board member back there. Help me.
Teresa Jones.
Teresa Jones, excuse me. I'm sorry. It's a function of right here. Thank you for coming, Ms. Jones. When I presented to the school board on Tuesday night, Commissioner Kimbrough offered this resolution as coming from their community engagement. And I think as we go through and it's on the end, this is what we put out, but the last page is the resolution, and it's quite supportive, and I think that it helps us to be able to say that the Shelby County School Board has endorsed our core values, because that would, just as we use those core values to help translate to the public the kinds of decisions that we're going to make, this also helps to translate to the public that the Shelby County School Board is of like mind in terms of where we're going, and therefore very likely we anticipate that they're very likely to approve this plan and to implement this plan to the best of their ability. So I wanted you to see this, and any of you and all of you that run into Shelby County School Board members, I thank them for this, and I think that it would be good for you as you go through to do so also.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If you don't mind, I'd also like to just, since we've met and officially acted upon things, provide a report to the TPC.
Absolutely. That
based
should have been on the
upon,
agenda.
some
Thank
of the
you.
other actions that
Thank
we
you,
took. But
Mr. Jones,
I would
if
say
you
that
could.
most importantly, that in our board meeting on Tuesday, we did endorse the guiding principles of the TCP, unanimously, of course. Prior to what also took place since we last met, the Combined Unified School Board actually participated in a training session conducted by the Center for the Reform of School Systems. And it was an activity that took place all day Friday as well as all day Saturday. And Memphis City Schools had already participated in it, but a majority of the board felt that it would be a good opportunity for everyone to gauge and to learn from what's taking place across districts throughout the country, which CRSS has had an opportunity to work with a number of large school districts. If you recall, in some of the presentation material that we had last week, particularly in our administrative and organizational meeting, Charlotte-Mecklenburg is one of the districts that has been, well, first of all, we invited them here and they presented before us. But some of the work that CRSS did with Charlotte-Mecklenburg has attributed to their being a recipient of the Brough Prize. So those are some of the other activities that we went through at the board meeting. We also addressed some internal board policies, working on those. And I would say, based upon the work of the TPC, that it has inspired us as a board to take a look and just be more engaged with our community and be more deliberate in our outreach. Because after the work that the TPC has done, after 2013, it's still going to be important for us to have a gauge of what it is that our community wants out of us. And lastly, we approved the joint, what will probably be our first significant joint purchase, and this is for a data warehousing software package. And it's some information, well, it's a company called Otis Ed. And what it'll do, garbage in equals garbage out. This is a way for us, if we may have, or if there's no way for you to extract the data, it does you no good. But this Otis Ed software package, both administrations worked collaboratively and selecting this particular company that I think will be our first step in looking at a joint purchase that will go beyond 2013. So if there's anything else, I'll bring it to you at the after we have the next board meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. I think that it's good to hear those things from you, and I think there are other ways that the districts are already working together, and I think as part of your community engagement, it would be good for you to begin to highlight those, because I know that you are, and we appreciate that report. Also at the meeting I attended, there was a wonderful presentation and it was a joint presentation. It was a choral group from Southwind High School in Shelby County and White Station High School in Memphis City, who came together with their band, with their choir director, and did a joint presentation, and it was just absolutely fabulous. So one of these days I may surprise you guys with a joint presentation at this meeting. The last time I was there, a month ago, there was a joint presentation by two drama departments, both, and the students get it right. They're working together and they're doing a good job. So it's just very uplifting to see students, and helps remind us why we're doing this. Finally, the next meeting is here at Code Enforcement. Remember, February the 16th. We will get you some information about when that basic BEP presentation will take place, because the majority of that meeting will be dedicated to us hearing presentations from the municipal the municipality mayors. Is there a motion at this time to adjourn? I think Mr. Hart has a question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to encourage the executive committee to put on their next agenda some discussion about engaging some of our state representatives with all the activities going on there. I think it may be beneficial to our effort, especially in light of some of our mayor's comments about some of the challenges out there, and I think he's right on target. So I'll leave that to the judgment of the executive committee, though, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hart. And we would welcome any suggestions, though, that you may have as to how that might be done, but I'll put that on the agenda for the next executive